Pharmaceutical drugs such as painkillers, antidepressants, or sleeping tablets compared to homeopathic medicine. The curious case of the cat who was cured by a homeopathic remedy made from snake venom. And what is health actually? Victor.cirone gives a wonderful explanation. He says, it's fulfilling your destiny, and that's what homeopathy helps you do. He goes on to conclude our chat with a wonderful explanation of a worldview through the periodic table. If these things interest you as much as they interest me, then do carry on watching. And let me know if you like it. See you soon.
Hello, Victor. Thank you so much for joining me today. What I would love to get through with you is your personal healing journey, how you got into the healing disciplines, the difference between homeopathic medicine and pharmaceutical drugs, the relationship between herbal medicine and homeopathic medicine, the law of similars, and how alchemy connects to all of this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. So we'll begin with the first question, how I got into this work in the first place. And
Please.
I think it is a common story where people who work in the healing arts have gone through some sort of healing crisis of their own.
Like
and
me.
This is exactly what's happened with me when I was in my early 20s, and I went through quite a serious issue. Went through the conventional medical system, got surgery, but then there were lots of questions that were left unanswered. And so that opened a door to start to explore some of the questions that I had about my own health, what had happened, what I could do to deepen my own understanding of what was going on with my body and the implications for the rest of my life. So initially I pursued herbal medicine, and gradually, as I expanded my horizons, I came to homeopathy. And this was by means of contracting quite a severe poison ivy rash. And I was working as a herbalist and used many of the well-indicated herbs that you would think of for treating poison ivy, but none of them actually were curative in any significant way. And so the little knowledge that I had at that time of homeopathy led me to go to a pharmacy and pick up a bottle of Roostox, which is potentized poison ivy. And I took my initial dose of that medicine, and within about 5 or 10 minutes, the itching, which was quite severe, had been reduced by about 80%. And
Amazing.
With a few more doses after the next couple of days, the rash, which had been spreading and which I had become quite concerned about, had completely disappeared. And so
Incredible.
that was always at the back of my mind. And gradually, as I continued my practice in clinical herbal medicine, I started to encounter patients that I didn't really feel I was helping to the fullest extent. And there were issues that people were bringing to the table that I couldn't necessarily make sense of, or that I couldn't fully address just by using herbs. And herbs are, remarkable in terms of their healing properties, and I still use them quite extensively in my practice. But I felt that there was something missing in terms of my ability to grasp issues and to be able to prescribe in a deeper way. And so that's what led me to pursue training in homeopathy.
So, we go straight into like treats like then, because the Roostox is a bit of the poison. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, it's basically same treats same. Yeah. In the case of Roostox, so isopathy rather than homeopathy. But that has its place in homeopathic treatment, and we see this, for example, when a patient has been exposed to some kind of noxious substance, whether it be poison ivy or an allopathic drug of some kind, or even a vitamin or supplement that they've been taking for many years, under the mistaken assumption that it was helping them, when in fact it was causing a disturbance at a vital level. And so this is a part of what homeopathic treatment can entail, where you're essentially doing a kind of homeopathic detox. Yeah. And so in these kinds of cases, you can also test the hypothesis by giving whatever the substance in question is in a potentized form, and observe the effects that it has on the symptomatology, the symptom picture of the patient. And this is true both with respect to, say, a patient has taken a certain drug and then they experience a series of adverse reactions, and they link it in their mind to exposure to that drug. That's more clear. But there are other cases where, for example, we can take a more serious example of a child with epilepsy, and you take the case and you find out that the mother had been taking Effexor, which is a SSRI antidepressant drug, very widely prescribed during the pregnancy and before conception. And we know without any doubt that this exposure during pregnancy greatly increases the risk of epilepsy and other neurological conditions in young children.
And is that still, is it still possible to help that child that has epilepsy because of the drug that the mother was taking?
Yes. And so, always we have to take things case by case, because it's always a question too of the extent of damage that a person has been subjected to. Yeah. But of course, you can never know until a solid, robust treatment is carried out, the extent to which a person can recover from something.
And so just coming back to antidepressants, because I do have a friend who is considering antidepressants at the moment, and I have sort of said, no, please don't take the antidepressant. Please find another way. I mean, I know, you have said that every case is unique and you have to take it case by case, but how would you start to sort of work something out with her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So essentially, you have to try and understand fundamentally what actually needs to be cured in a patient. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciate most about homeopathy, is that more than any other system of medicine that I've encountered, is that we have the tools to begin to understand that in a deeper way. Yeah. And we can talk about this in many different aspects. And one thing that I think perhaps I can start with is this idea of what in homeopathy we call a miasm. Yeah. And a miasm is, you could say, a inherited energy body. Yeah. Or you could say that the theory of miasms relates to the theory of epigenetics. And so, to give an example, one can think of, say, for example, a child with extreme behavioral disorders, and I've seen this actually in more than one case that has been given actually the same remedy, but it's a miasmatic prescription. So the child has very severe rage, temper tantrums, anger, destructive, violent behavior, rebelliousness, not listening to anything that the parents have to say. And you take the case, and what you find is that many of these symptom pictures fit the homeopathic remedy tuberculinum, which is potentized tuberculosis. And the child then is given this remedy, and the behavioral issues start to greatly improve. The violence, the rage, the destructive qualities, these kinds of behaviors begin to go away. And what that suggests possibly is that there is somewhere in the ancestral line tubercular infection that had affected the ways in which the vital force came to expression in subsequent generations after the exposure to tuberculosis. So even though these children did not have active tuberculosis, they had, you could say, an energetic overlay of tuberculosis, which had not actually been resolved. And this is what can happen when diseases are suppressed. So the patient is labeled as cured because the symptoms are no longer there, but in fact, the innate energetic state of the disease has not been adequately dealt with. And so this can actually become transmitted and can affect the person's life in ways that perhaps they don't even necessarily associate with a prior infection. And that's in homeopathy what we call a miasm. Basically, the idea of a heritable and inherited energy body or energetic force. And this is really something unique to homeopathy, and it is actually the beginnings of the theory of epigenetics. Was founded by Hahnemann. The conventional scientific establishment won't acknowledge this, but the theory of epigenetics was essentially founded by Samuel Hahnemann, and with his theory of the miasms. So to go back to the question around depression, in every case, we have to try and take into consideration the fundamental issue of what actually needs to be cured in a patient. It could be a hygienic problem. It could be that there is a clear deficiency that actually might be solvable through nutritional means, because the diet is off, or there is some problem with absorption, something like this. And these kinds of problems, even though quite simple, can actually have quite detrimental effects on a person's state of health. But then, of course, there are cases where, and this is very common, where a person is feeling very unwell, feeling very, very depressed. They go in for all kinds of testing, and the doctors will say, well, there's nothing that we can really see that's wrong with you. All of your lab results are good. So it's psychosomatic, and so we're going to give you an antidepressant. Yeah, this is often what will happen. And in such cases, then, basically the person is exposed to a substance that most probably is neurotoxic and will come with quite significant suppressive effects in terms of its long-term use. And people will often argue in favor of the psychiatric establishment, but the reality is that many people who go through the treatment that the psychiatrists offer and the psychiatric drugs end up worse. A well-known side effect, so-called side effect, and this is something that we could talk about. I don't actually believe in side effects. There are only effects. When a person takes a drug, there's no such thing as a side effect. A drug of any kind, whether it's a herb or a homeopathic medicine or a pharmaceutical drug, only has effects. It doesn't have side effects, because any substance that a person takes will influence and shape the organismic integrity. And that is what we mean by the effect of a drug, is that it alters feeling, function, and sensation in some way. Period. There's no such thing as a main effect and a side effect of a drug. There's only an effect. And this is definitely the case with pharmaceutical drugs. Because they are suppressive in nature, they will cause a disturbance in the innate functionality of the organism. And it's labeled as a side effect, but actually it's a suppression that's going on in many instances. Well,
so then really the patient is never free from the problem.
That's right. That's right. And we could talk a little bit about the mechanism of suppression so that it's understood what's actually meant here. By suppression, and this is a very common example, say we have a child who has a severe eczema on the hands, and constantly scratching and distressed, and so the parents get worried and they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, here's a steroid for the child, put it on topically every day, come back in 2 months, we'll see where things are at. And at the end of that 2 months, wow, the skin is all clear, the child doesn't have eczema anymore. And doctor says, okay, great, come back if anything recurs, and we'll go back on another course of steroids. What happens is the eczema doesn't come back, but in 6 months, the child develops respiratory issues, quite severe. A child never had this problem before. And they go back into the doctor, and the doctor says, well, you have asthma. Here is a steroid inhaler. You have to take this now. And what's missing in this diagnosis from the conventional doctor is that the eczema and the asthma are not separate diseases. The eczema has been pushed inwards to a more vital region of the organism. And that's a classic mechanism, a classic example of suppression, where something goes from a less vital region, which is the skin, to a more vital region, which is the lungs. And so say these parents then thought, well, we don't want this. We don't want our child to start taking this inhaler every time they're running or whatever. So let's go see a homeopath. And the homeopath gives a good remedy. What will most likely happen is that the asthma will improve and the skin symptoms will return. Because with a good homeopathic remedy, we see a movement from a more vital region to a less vital region. The vital force has been enabled through the correct homeopathic remedy to bring something that was affecting a vital region of the body to push it outwards, to a less vital region of the organism. And gradually, with continued treatment, the skin issue will also resolve. So rather than having to go through this whole ordeal of suppressing the eczema, getting it turned into asthma, and then reversing the whole thing, had this remedy been given in the first place, it would have never progressed to asthma. Asthma was only a consequence of drug suppression. And
So then the question is that if you have a patient like you've just described, and let's say the skin condition comes back, the patient has to go through the skin condition and stay with the homeopathy until it's cleared up. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. And this is what is what's commonly experienced. And you can even have patients who have come for treatment and you find a very good remedy for them. And they can even experience symptoms that they have experienced decades ago come back. It's not even, doesn't even have to be within the recent time frame, but it could be symptoms that the person experienced as a child. Say they're 50 years old now, and they had some kind of, say, infectious disease or some disease that had been suppressed in some way. It could even be eczema on the skin, that had been suppressed. Say it didn't go to the lungs, but it had been suppressed in some way and not fully adequately addressed. You can say the energetic imprint of that disease still stays with that person, just as the tubercular miasm, manifests in future generations in terms of these behavioral disturbances of children. So too in a person's own life, if a problem had not been adequately addressed or cured in a true sense, then there is the possibility that there is a kind of a lingering influence of that disease always in the background, and that with the right circumstances, it can turn into something else. And with homeopathic treatment, it can come to expression so that it can be resolved. And this is often what we see with a good homeopathic treatment.
And is there a way of doing that gently, shall we say? Because I'm sure at that point, it's quite easy to lose patience and they go, look, I just can't take this anymore.
Well, the idea is always to be as gentle as possible. And of course, this doesn't happen in every case. Return of old symptoms is something that you do observe. But I think also patient education is very important to explain to patients when things come up that, it is actually part of what we're looking for, and that it's not anything to fear. And usually when these things happen, usually it's a short recurrence of old symptoms. It's not that you plunge the person back into a worse state of health. Of course not. It's that the body now has the intelligence such that it knows how to deal with a problem that previously it did not know how to deal with. And so usually when you have a return of old symptoms, it will be short in duration. And after the body has resolved the problem that was kind of just there in the background, you could say it was latent rather than manifest. And so you've now liberated the vital force of the organism such that the latent disease state has been dealt with. And so the innate state of health of the patient has overall been greatly improved. So
you're on the right track, basically.
Yes. That's right.
I'd like to talk a little bit about how you diagnose, how you choose a remedy. I just want to read out a short thing that I saw on your Instagram, because I love this story about the cat and the snake. And I've just shortened it, and I just want to share this with everybody. So Lilith, a 1-year-old cat, displayed extreme attention-seeking and frenetic behaviors since kittenhood, often seeming possessed. She cried incessantly, never satisfied with attention, and was terrified of rain, hiding and trembling during storms. She was treated with a homeopathic remedy derived from coral snake venom, known for addressing excessive vocalization, egotism, an intense desire for attention, and fears like those of rain. After a single dose, Lilith's behavior transformed, she became calm, contemplative, and finally at peace, free from her former turmoil. So, I mean, Victor, I love this story, and I really like you to just expand on this whole story for me.
Yeah. And so Lilith is, she's actually my cat.
Ah,
And she's doing quite well. So I monitor her quite closely. And yeah, she has always had these tendencies since we first got her when she was quite young. And it got to the point where she wasn't outgrowing it. It was actually getting worse. And so we sat down and found a good remedy for her. But yeah, that's always the question: how to find the right remedy for a person. And this opens up the question of how close do we have to be in terms of our prescribing methodology? How close is close enough, you could say? Yeah, because now in the 21st century, you have varying opinions about how homeopathy is supposed to be practiced and how to prescribe remedies. There are some homeopaths, they call themselves classical homeopaths, and that term is, I would say, largely confused because people have actually quite different definitions of what that means. But some of these people who consider themselves classical homeopaths believe that homeopathy should be practiced the way that it was practiced 200 years ago, and there's no room for any evolution. I'm not of that camp. I believe that even when you look at the writings of Hahnemann himself, his main text, the Organon of Medicine, he revised 6 times, and there are quite significant changes when you track the development of the Organon. So his methodology was developing during the years of his life, and he continued to introduce new remedies into his practice. He was not content with just working with a small number of remedies. He was increasingly introducing, and other homeopaths after Hahnemann were also introducing new remedies. And now today we have available at the pharmacies over 8,000 remedies versus, say, the 200 remedies that were available several hundred years ago. And so this means that we have a much wider scope in terms of the available medicines. And so how is it in this forest of symptoms and forest of remedies, how do you find a remedy that is actually curative for a patient? And in every case, you look for that which is strange, rare, and peculiar, not that which is common. So in the case of Lilith, the cat, you always have to observe what is actually strange, rare, and peculiar in the case. One of the things that is, and striking, yeah? I mean, of course, many animals are afraid of loud noises, but to be so petrified by rain to that degree, and had you seen her, you would see that it's out of proportion to what you would expect from a cat. Yeah, like trembling, trembling from rain, very petrified. That's unusual. Yeah, of course, cats like attention. They like to be considered special, but again, in her it was out of proportion. Yeah, and so those qualities, and also the jealousy that she would show, wanting to be special, but then also demanding attention in a way that was out of proportion for a normal cat. So you take these qualities, and then you put them together, and you arrive at this remedy, elapse, which is very well known for a very striking fear of rain, which is quite peculiar. I mean, there are people who don't like rain, there are people who enjoy rain, but there are not so many people who are afraid of rain. It's quite an unusual thing to be afraid of rain. Yeah. And so that was actually the key symptom that then led to this remedy. But there are other ways. Yeah. And there are actually cases in which, when you're not working with animals, but working with humans, that a person can be actually led to name the remedy that they need. And this opens up very interesting possibilities in terms of prescribing. And I would say more often than not, you do see that patients who name the remedy, it's usually an animal remedy of some kind, because it's something that the person knows, or what's considered an imponderable remedy, which is An imponderable is a remedy that's made from, you could say, an intangible energy source. So we have things like Luna, which is made from the moon, Sol, which is made from sunlight, Spectrum, which is full spectrum light. We have mobile phone radiation, computer radiation. There's remedies made from actually all of the celestial bodies. It's actually a group of remedies, the celestial bodies. We have a black hole as a remedy. So these kinds of things that are,
Wow.
yeah, that people can name. You do see that in some cases that a person will go deep into their own state and they are actually able to express the disturbance. And I can give one example. The first time that I saw this happen in my practice was I was treating a woman who was, you could say, quite distressed at the split that happened in the family around COVID. And there were people that were, very much on board with the mainstream narrative, and then people that were against, and it caused a divide in the family. Very typical, but this had greatly disturbed this patient. And as she went deeper and deeper and deeper into her state, she said, at one point, I feel like a lightning rod. I've never heard someone describe their sensation like that. I feel like a lightning rod. And so, when a person says something like this, you note it down and you see, is it just an image? Yeah, something that is kind of, you could say, the imaginative workings of the person as they're trying to explain their state, or is it something that's actually speaking to the vital level of their experience, which is the level on which we want to prescribe? Yeah, always on the vital. Yeah, we have the physical, the energetic, the emotional, the mental, and the vital, you could say. And the deepest prescriptions always reach the vital. Yeah. And you can say that is actually the state that the person is born with. Yeah. That's when you understand what's called a constitutional remedy, or a simillimum, is what we would call it in homeopathy. It is the state that the person is, their innate state. Yeah. And in this case, the remedy that I prescribed was fulgurite, which is fossilized lightning. And it had very, very significant impacts on this case. So the thing is that you can get to a point where a patient is able to express this state, but you always have to confirm that it is actually a vital expression, rather than something that's coming from a more superficial level of experience. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you the number of patients who have said, "I feel like a chameleon." Yeah, doesn't mean they need chameleon, but in some cases, patients will express.
Really?
Yes, give expression to some kind of animal state or imponderable state, and it turns out to be the remedy that they actually need. And in this case, so the patient says, I feel like a lightning rod, but that's not enough to prescribe lightning as a remedy. You have to find, are there other qualities that actually can justify the prescription? And in this case, what was interesting, and this is also something quite fascinating, is that you ask patients about their dreams, for example, and it's always very interesting when a patient says, well, I very rarely remember my dreams, but just last night, before I was going to talk to you, I had a dream. And that, for me, is, you could say, the super consciousness that comes through and is trying to give some kind of material that can be used in a constructive way in the homeopathic consultation. It's like the super consciousness has it's been given the invitation. It says, oh, okay, there's a potential here. I'm going to give some information that can be usable. Yeah. And so in this case, the patient had a dream that she was walking and she had mobility issues, with her hips. And so in the dream, she was walking and she was in a group full of people, a party environment, and she felt like she was about to fall. And no one was around, no one was helping her. And she was walking and I'm going to fall. And then eventually she did fall. And that was the dream. And when you look up fulgurite, which is a new remedy, there's not a lot of clinical data on it. It has these dreams of fear of falling and dreams of falling. So that was further confirmation, as well as the specifics of the pain, where it was in the body, the sensation of the pain, it all fit the remedy. But you see that the expression came through directly from the patient being able to access that vital level of her own experience. Yeah. And this is
which is which is true in a way to that person's healing, rather than a generic drug that one is given over the, by your GP.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And
Very
it's
unique.
and it's what really distinguishes homeopathy, because really you could say that also in homeopathy, the medicine and the disease are the same. Yeah. And homeopathy is the only system of medicine that's true, where the disease and the medicine are the same thing. Because in homeopathic terms, disease is delusion. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so when you can give the medicine that encapsulates the state of delusion of the patient, then you're allowing them to come more and more and more into themselves, to step out of the state of delusion into the state of health. Yeah. And so this is something that this conception, you could say, is rejected by the so-called classical homeopaths. They think that you just have to take almost like a list of symptoms, and then from that list of symptoms, you prescribe one of the 200 remedies that we've had for a long time. But this is when you look at things from a rational perspective. So say, for example, the most well-known homeopathic medicine that we have, which is to say the medicine that has the most number of symptoms and that has the most entries in the homeopathic repertory, which is what we use to help analyze and assess a case. A repertory is basically a collection of symptoms. And then after every symptom are a list of remedies that are associated with the symptom in clinical experience or from provings. And so sulfur is the remedy that has the most entries in the repertory, and that is the most well-known homeopathic remedy of all the 8,000 that we have. Yeah. And sulfur is, of course, an element. It's on the periodic table. So why, from a purely rational perspective, why would it be that sulfur, this one element, is any more significant than any of the other elements that are on the periodic table? There's nothing innate in sulfur that makes it more important or more significant as a healing agent than, say, the noble gases, which have been introduced into homeopathy more recently, or the lanthanides, or the radioactive substances. These are substances that we don't have as much clinical experience with, but it does not mean that they are less useful. It means that we don't have as much clinical experience and with those substances, and therefore it's more difficult to recognize them. Yeah. So rather than just dismissing them and trying to fit a patient into a box, a more modern homeopathic approach takes this expansive view and works on the level of sensation and delusion. And when you do that, it makes, first of all, for me, it makes homeopathy much more interesting, because then you're going deep into a state of patient's experience rather than just working on a superficial level of basically putting symptoms together and then looking at the top remedies that come through and saying, oh, okay, well, it's either sulfur or it's natrum muriaticum. Well, maybe it's neither of those. Maybe you won't arrive to the remedy by just, putting symptoms together in a box and adding up like it's a math equation. Yeah. Working more on the level of, again, the innate vital state of the patient and prescribing on that basis. And this is an approach that has gradually developed over time. To go back to this point of how not to get lost in the forest of symptoms, and the forest of remedies that we have available, one of the things that we've developed in homeopathy over the last 50 years in particular was systematics. Yeah. And it started actually with the periodic table. And there were a few homeopaths, Rajan Sankran and Jan Scholten and some others, who, as homeopathy was, you could say, expanding, started to think, well, okay, let's look at the periodic table. We have some remedies like sulfur that are quite well known, that we have a lot of clinical experience with, but then we have a lot of remedies on the periodic table that we know nothing about. So from these remedies that we do know, say the magnesium, aluminum, silica, carbon, mercury, sulfur. These are very well-known remedies that have been around for a long time. But then we have other remedies that have not been explored in homeopathy. Can we, on the basis of the information that we know, see if there is a logic or a pattern that is inherent in the periodic table that could then help us to develop an understanding of these elements that we know nothing of? And it turns out, yes, there is an innate logic in the periodic table. And I can briefly review it because it is very interesting. And it actually is, for me, one of the great scientific insights that homeopathy has offered to the world, and that very few people, apart from homeopaths, recognize. And that is to say that the entire human life drama, but not only the life drama of the individual human being, but also of civilization and humanity as a whole, is expressed in the logical progression of the elements of the periodic table. It's the energetic blueprint of all existence. So the first series, the hydrogen series, we have two elements. We have hydrogen and helium. And these remedies, you could say, have to do with incarnation, coming into being. So even pre-birth, not born into the world yet. So you can see these remedies in, for example, autistic children who appear as if they are not fully incarnated in their body. They're as if they are not here. Yeah. There are other uses of those remedies, but just to give a general sense of how things progress as you move down. So the hydrogen series is about unbornness, spaceless, space or spaceless, time or timeless, these kinds of things. Yeah. As you move down to the next series, the carbon series, you have to do, actually, this is where the birth process, where the birth actually happens. And the various elements in the carbon series have to do with the birth process itself. But in the carbon series, you see, for example, themes of the individual starting to come through. So it's the birth process itself, but it's coming into being. That's, I guess, the best way to put it. The birth coming into being, coming into existence. As you move down to the silicum series, you have basically me and the other. It's the beginning stages of recognizing myself vis-a-vis the other person, coming to understand that there are that I don't exist just as a monadic soul, but that there are other people. So there are relationships. It's about fitting in, about the neighborhood, you could say. Yeah. As you go down then to the iron series, the ferrum series, it has to do with, okay, I'm here in the world with other people, and now it's my duty to work. Yeah. To follow the rules, to understand how I function in society. What is my place? Yeah. And so there's often themes of, you could say, feeling observed, examination, being criticized, these kinds of things. Yeah, but it's about work, responsibility, taking on this kind of role. Yeah, order and rules. After the iron series, you have the silver series, the argentum series, which is about, okay, I've established my place in the society, but now I want to do something more than that. Yeah, I want to do something special. Yeah, so it has to do with the arts, with performance, with being seen, with being unique, with being admired. Yeah, that's the iron series. The silver series. Then you will get to the aurum series, the gold series, which is split up from aurum and lanthanides. The lanthanides are rare earth elements that were only recently discovered and added to the periodic table, relatively speaking. But the aurum series and lanthanide series both have to do, you could say, with leadership. Yeah. So, okay, the silver series is about being special. The gold series is about then guiding and leading others, taking on the responsibility for others. And in the lanthanides in particular, it has to do especially with self-mastery or self-autonomy. Yeah. Aurum series, you can see, for example, and you do see people who say just naturally, innately, take on leadership positions. They could be, the stereotypical conception is that they have a very powerful position in an organization. But of course, you have people who need these remedies that don't work as a lawyer or someone in a high position. But you do often see people in these kinds of high managerial positions who just innately like to guide and lead other people. But of course, you could have people that are against the system that still have this kind of leadership quality. And then finally, lastly, you have the uranium series, the radioactive elements, which have to do, you could say, with breakdown, with decay, with disintegration. That is the end of the natural evolution of the elements. And you could say that this progression from the hydrogen series to the uranium series is a recapitulation of, again, the entire human life drama. And also, there are ways of looking at stages of the history of civilization that will place different civilizational epochs in these different stages of evolution. Right now, I think it's fair to say that we are very much in the seventh series, the uranium series, which is all about disintegration, decay. I mean, you look around and you see what's going on in the world. How can you doubt this? Yeah. And then the question is,
we need that to then start the new cycle, which is happening simultaneously.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So where do we go? Where do we go after that? That's the question. And one of the reasons that I love practicing homeopathy so much is that with a really good remedy, you are actually able to help people to evolve in a sense where they're able to navigate the difficulties that they face in the world and in their own lives. And this is something that actually homeopathy as a evolutionary means, as a tool for personal and collective evolution, is something that even Hahnemann spoke about, because basically when Hahnemann spoke about health, he was very explicit that he did not just mean the absence of disease symptoms, but you could say that with a good treatment, a person is better able to understand, recognize, and act on the higher purpose of his or her existence. Yeah, the fulfillment of destiny, you could say. But Hahnemann said to be able to fulfill the higher purpose of one's own existence. That is really the true definition of health, not just
That's beautiful.
Not just the elimination of symptoms. Yeah.
Victor, I mean, that is just in a nutshell, just so beautiful. Really, really beautiful. I had other questions, but I think that I don't even want to go on further from that last statement. So I thank you so much. There's a lot for myself and others to chew on. And just for those who have been watching, if you are interested in learning more, I'm going to put Victor's details in the box below. Please do contact him yourself if you wish, or follow him on Instagram and other social media platforms. And if you are interested in switching over from pharmaceutical drugs, please do it slowly and with somebody who can support you. Thank you very much for staying tuned, and I'll be back soon. I hope to see you again. Take care. Bye for now.